Sarah Martinez had always been smaller than her peers, but what she lacked in height, she made up for in determination. At 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighing barely 130 pounds, she stood out like a lone flower in a field of towering oak trees when she first arrived at Forward Operating Base Phoenix in Afghanistan. The base was home to the 82nd Airborne Division, where tradition ran as deep as the desert sand, and change came about as often as rain in the Sahara. The whispers started before she even unpacked her gear. Senior Sergeant Mike Thompson, a 20-year veteran with arms like tree trunks and a voice that could wake the dead, made no effort to hide his skepticism. He cornered his fellow soldiers near the mess hall that first evening, gesturing toward Sarah as she walked past carrying her equipment. "Look at her," Thompson said, shaking his head slowly. "Command must be losing their minds, sending us someone who looks like she should be teaching kindergarten instead of carrying a rifle. This isn't summer camp. Out here, when bullets start flying, you need someone who can handle the pressure, not someone who'll freeze up the moment things get ugly." Private First Class Danny Rodriguez, barely 19 himself, nodded along with the older sergeant. "She seems nice enough, but nice doesn't stop enemy fire. What happens when we're in a firefight and she can't keep up? What happens when we need someone to watch our backs and she's too scared to pull the trigger?" The doubt spread through the unit like wildfire in dry grass. During training exercises, every mistake Sarah made was amplified. Every success was dismissed as luck or lowered standards. When she successfully completed the obstacle course in record time, Staff Sergeant Williams attributed it to the course being made easier for the female soldiers. When she scored highest on the marksmanship test, Corporal Jenkins claimed the targets must have been moved closer. Sarah heard every comment, felt every skeptical glance, and absorbed every dismissive gesture. But instead of breaking her spirit, the constant criticism only fueled her determination to prove herself. She arrived at the firing range an hour before anyone else and stayed an hour after everyone left. She studied tactical manuals by flashlight when others were playing cards or writing letters home. She volunteered for every dangerous patrol and every difficult assignment, hoping to demonstrate her capabilities. Captain James Morrison, the unit's commanding officer, watched the dynamics unfold with growing concern. He had served alongside female soldiers before and knew their value, but he also understood the importance of unit cohesion. During one of his evening reports to Colonel Patricia Hayes, the base commander, he voiced his worries. "The men aren't accepting her, Colonel. It's affecting morale and could compromise mission effectiveness. Martinez is an outstanding soldier on paper, but if the unit doesn't trust her, it puts everyone at risk." Colonel Hayes, a stern woman in her 50s, who had climbed through the ranks during some of the military's most challenging periods for women, listened thoughtfully. She had faced similar challenges throughout her career and recognized the pattern all too well. "Give her time, Captain. Sometimes the best way to earn respect is through action, not words. Make sure she gets her chance." The chance Colonel Hayes spoke of came sooner than anyone expected. Intelligence reports indicated increased enemy activity in the Paktika province, where Taliban forces were reportedly planning attacks on coalition convoys. Sarah's unit received orders to conduct reconnaissance patrols in the area, gathering information and disrupting enemy operations. As the unit prepared for deployment, the whispers grew louder and more pointed. During the final briefing, Thompson addressed Captain Morrison directly in front of the entire squad. "Sir, with respect, I think we should reconsider Martinez's role in this operation. She hasn't been tested in real combat situations. The rest of us have been through multiple deployments together. We know we can count on each other when things go sideways." Other soldiers murmured their agreement. Rodriguez added, "Maybe she could handle communications from base camp or help with logistics. Something important but safer for everyone involved." Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. but she maintained her composure. She had learned that emotional outbursts would only reinforce the stereotypes her colleagues already held about female soldiers. Instead, she stood up straight and looked directly at Captain Morrison. "Sir, I volunteered for combat duty because I believe I can contribute to this unit's success. I've completed the same training as everyone else, met the same standards, and I'm ready to serve wherever you need me most." Captain Morrison studied the faces around the room. He could see the doubt in his soldiers' eyes, but he also saw something else in Sarah's expression that reminded him why he had become an officer in the first place. It was the same determination he had seen in some of the best soldiers he had ever served alongside. "Martinez will deploy with the unit as planned," Morrison announced firmly. "She's earned her place here through hard work and dedication. This discussion is over." As the meeting broke up, Sarah caught fragments of conversations that confirmed her worst fears. The other soldiers weren't just skeptical about her abilities. They were actively worried that her presence would endanger their lives. She realized that no amount of training scores or physical fitness tests would convince them. She would need to prove herself where it mattered most, in the crucible of actual combat. That night, as Sarah checked and rechecked her equipment for the 100th time, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. Growing up in a small Texas town, she had always been told that girls should focus on traditionally feminine pursuits. Her high school guidance counselor had suggested nursing or teaching when Sarah expressed interest in the military. Even her own family had questioned her decision to enlist. But Sarah had always felt called to serve something greater than herself. She believed deeply in the mission to protect freedom and democracy, even if it meant facing danger in faraway places. She had endured the rigorous training, the physical challenges, and the emotional strain of being constantly underestimated. Now, finally, she would have the chance to show everyone what she was truly capable of achieving. The convoy rolled out before dawn, 6 armored vehicles carrying 12 soldiers deep into Taliban territory. Sarah rode in the third vehicle, positioned between Thompson and Rodriguez, who had barely acknowledged her presence since loading their gear. The landscape outside was desolate and unforgiving, with rocky hills providing countless hiding spots for enemy fighters. Captain Morrison's voice crackled through the radio every few minutes, providing updates on their route and reminding everyone to stay alert. Intelligence suggested they were entering an area where several IED attacks had occurred in recent weeks, but the mission was critical. They needed to establish an observation post overlooking a valley where Taliban leaders were suspected of meeting. 3 hours into the patrol, the lead vehicle suddenly stopped. Through her headset, Sarah heard the driver's urgent report. "Roadblock ahead, Captain. Looks deliberate. Large rocks positioned across the road, no way around them on either side." Morrison's response was immediate and decisive. "All vehicles halt. Dismount and establish a perimeter. This could be an ambush setup. Martinez, Rodriguez, take the right flank. Thompson, Williams, cover the left. Everyone else, stay with the vehicles and watch for movement in those hills." As Sarah jumped from the vehicle, her training took over completely. Every sense became heightened, every movement deliberate and calculated. She could feel her heart pounding, but her breathing remained steady and controlled. Rodriguez moved beside her, his earlier confidence replaced by obvious nervousness as he gripped his rifle with sweating palms. They had been in position for barely 5 minutes when the first shots rang out. The sound echoed off the surrounding hills, making it difficult to pinpoint the exact location of the shooters. Sarah immediately identified the muzzle flashes coming from a ridge about 300 meters to their right, exactly where Morrison had positioned her and Rodriguez. "Contact right! 300 meters! Elevated position!" Sarah shouted into her radio, while simultaneously returning accurate fire. Her shots were precise and controlled, each one calculated to suppress the enemy position while conserving ammunition. Rodriguez, however, was struggling. His hands shook as he tried to aim, and his shots were going wide of their intended targets. "I can't see them," he called out frantically. Where are they shooting from? Without hesitation, Sarah grabbed Rodriguez by the shoulder and pointed toward the enemy position. 2 o'clock, behind the large boulder with the scraggly tree. See the muzzle flash? Aim just to the left of it and fire in controlled bursts. But Rodriguez was panicking. His breathing was rapid and shallow, and he was firing wildly without taking proper aim. Sarah realized he was experiencing his first real combat situation and was completely overwhelmed by the chaos and danger. The firefight intensified as more enemy fighters joined the attack from multiple directions. Thompson's voice boomed across the radio. "They've got us pinned down. We need to move before they flank us." Captain Morrison was coordinating the response when an RPG exploded near the lead vehicle, sending shrapnel flying in all directions. The blast temporarily deafened everyone and filled the air with smoke and dust. Through the chaos, Sarah noticed movement on the ridge that others had missed. 3 Taliban fighters were attempting to work their way down the hillside to a position where they could attack the convoy from behind. If they succeeded, Morrison's entire unit would be trapped in a deadly crossfire with nowhere to retreat. Sarah made a split-second decision that would define her military career. "Rodriguez, stay here and keep firing at the main position. I'm going to stop those fighters from flanking us." Before Rodriguez could respond, Sarah was moving. She used the rocky terrain to her advantage, staying low and moving in short, quick bursts from one piece of cover to the next. Her movements were textbook perfect, exactly as she had practiced hundreds of times during training exercises. The 3 enemy fighters were focused on reaching their flanking position and didn't notice Sarah's approach until she was less than 50 meters away. She had positioned herself perfectly, with clear lines of sight to all 3 targets and solid cover behind a large rock formation. Sarah controlled her breathing and steadied her rifle. Her first shot dropped the lead fighter instantly. The second fighter turned toward the sound, but Sarah's second shot found its mark before he could raise his weapon. The third fighter attempted to retreat back up the hill, but Sarah's third shot ended his escape attempt. With the flanking threat eliminated, Sarah immediately turned her attention back to the main enemy position. From her new vantage point, she could see additional fighters that had been hidden from the convoy's position. She began systematically engaging each target, her shots precise and deadly effective. Thompson, who had been skeptical of Sarah's abilities since her arrival, watched in amazement as she single-handedly neutralized threat after threat. Her shooting was unlike anything he had seen in his 20 years of military service. Every shot had purpose. Every movement showed tactical awareness beyond her experience level. "Morrison, you seen this?" Thompson called over the radio. "Martinez is tearing them apart over there. She just took out the whole flanking team by herself." Meanwhile, Sarah had identified the enemy's heavy machine gun position, which had been keeping most of Morrison's unit pinned behind their vehicles. The position was well fortified and difficult to approach, but Sarah had noticed a weakness in their defensive setup. She maneuvered to a position where she could see the machine gunner's profile when he leaned out to fire. It was an extremely difficult shot, requiring her to account for distance, wind, and the target's movement pattern. Sarah watched the gunner's rhythm for several moments, timing his movements precisely. When she pulled the trigger, the shot flew true across 350 meters of desert air and found its target. The enemy machine gun fell silent immediately, allowing Morrison's pinned soldiers to advance and secure the area. The entire firefight had lasted less than 20 minutes, but in that short time, Sarah had fundamentally changed how her unit viewed her capabilities. As the shooting stopped and the soldiers began checking for casualties and securing the area, the magnitude of Sarah's contribution became clear. Rodriguez, who had barely managed to fire his weapon effectively during the engagement, stared at Sarah with a mixture of awe and embarrassment. "How did you do that? You made it look so easy, like you were on a training range instead of in a real firefight." Sarah was already checking her equipment and preparing for the next phase of their mission. "It wasn't easy. It was just necessary." We all have jobs to do out here, and I did mine. Captain Morrison approached Sarah's position to assess the situation. As he surveyed the area where she had been fighting, he began counting the enemy casualties that could be directly attributed to her actions. What he discovered would soon shock everyone in the unit, including Colonel Hayes back at base camp. The young soldier who had been dismissed as too small and too weak for combat duty had just delivered a performance that would be talked about for years to come. But Sarah herself seemed almost unaware of the significance of what she had accomplished. She was already focused on the next objective, ready to continue serving her unit and her country with the same dedication that had brought her to this moment. The return journey to Forward Operating Base Phoenix was markedly different from the morning's departure. The same soldiers who had questioned Sarah's presence now rode in respectful silence, stealing glances at the young woman who had saved their lives just hours earlier. Thompson, in particular, seemed lost in thought, occasionally shaking his head as if still processing what he had witnessed. Captain Morrison spent the entire ride documenting the engagement details for his after-action report. As the convoy's commanding officer, he was required to provide a comprehensive account of the firefight, including individual soldier performance and enemy casualties. What he was writing would soon create ripples throughout the entire base. Upon arrival at base camp, Morrison went directly to Colonel Hayes's office, while the rest of the unit debriefed and cleaned their equipment. Sarah, exhausted but still focused on her duties, methodically checked her rifle and organized her gear. She had no idea that Captain Morrison was providing Colonel Hayes with a detailed account that would change everything. "Colonel, I need to report on today's engagement," Morrison began, spreading his field notes across Hayes's desk. "We encountered a well-organized ambush with approximately 12 to 15 enemy fighters. The engagement lasted 18 minutes from first contact to all clear." Colonel Hayes listened intently as Morrison described the tactical situation and how the firefight had unfolded. But when he reached the part about Sarah's performance, his voice took on a tone of amazement that caught the colonel's attention immediately. "Martinez single-handedly neutralized the flanking threat and then systematically eliminated the remaining enemy positions. Colonel, in 23 years of military service, I have never witnessed marksmanship and tactical awareness at this level from such a young soldier." Hayes leaned forward, studying Morrison's notes carefully. "Captain, are you certain about these numbers? According to your report, Private Martinez is credited with 11 confirmed enemy kills during a single engagement." Morrison nodded emphatically. "Absolutely certain, Colonel." Thompson and Williams both confirmed the count independently. She eliminated the three-man flanking team completely, took out the machine gun nest, and picked off individual fighters from multiple positions. Her shooting was surgical in its precision. The colonel sat back in her chair, processing this information. 11 confirmed kills in a single engagement was extraordinary for any soldier. But for a young woman who had been consistently underestimated by her peers, it was nothing short of remarkable. That evening, Colonel Hayes made an unprecedented decision. Instead of handling Sarah's achievement through normal channels, she decided to address the entire base during the evening briefing. Word spread quickly that the colonel had something important to announce, and soldiers from various units gathered in the main briefing hall. Sarah was told to report to the briefing hall, but had no idea why. She assumed it was routine administrative business and took a seat near the back of the room with the rest of her unit. Thompson sat nearby, still unusually quiet since their return from the mission. Colonel Hayes took the podium and surveyed the assembled soldiers. The hall was packed with nearly 200 personnel, from fresh recruits to seasoned veterans. The buzz of conversation died down as everyone waited for the announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to discuss the reality of combat effectiveness and the dangers of preconceived notions," Colonel Hayes began. This morning, one of our patrols encountered a significant enemy force in what appeared to be a carefully planned ambush. The engagement involved approximately 15 enemy fighters in well-fortified positions. The colonel paused, allowing the gravity of the situation to register with her audience. Many of the soldiers in the room had been in similar situations and understood the deadly serious nature of such encounters. During this 18-minute firefight, our soldiers performed with exceptional courage and skill. However, one soldier's performance was so outstanding that it deserves special recognition and serves as a powerful lesson for all of us. Sarah felt a growing sense of unease as she noticed several soldiers turning to look in her direction. She had no idea what Colonel Hayes was building toward, but the attention was making her uncomfortable. "Private Sarah Martinez, please stand up," Colonel Hayes announced loudly, her voice carrying clearly throughout the packed hall. Sarah's stomach dropped as hundreds of pairs of eyes turned toward her. She slowly stood, her face flushing red with embarrassment and confusion. She had no idea why she was being singled out in front of the entire base. Colonel Hayes continued, her voice growing stronger and more emphatic. "Private Martinez is the soldier many of you have questioned and doubted since her arrival at this base. Some of you have openly suggested that she wasn't suitable for combat duty, that she would be a liability when facing real enemy contact." The hall was completely silent now, with many soldiers shifting uncomfortably as they realized where this was heading. Thompson looked down at his boots, clearly remembering his own words about Sarah's capabilities. "Today, Private Martinez proved definitively that your doubts were not only wrong but dangerously misplaced," Colonel Hayes declared, her voice rising to ensure every person in the room could hear clearly. "In a single combat engagement, Private Martinez achieved 11 confirmed enemy kills." The number hit the room like a physical blow. Gasps and murmurs erupted throughout the hall as soldiers processed what they had just heard. 11 confirmed kills was an extraordinary number for any soldier, regardless of experience or background. 11 kills, Colonel Hayes repeated, emphasizing each word. She eliminated an entire flanking team that would have resulted in casualties among her fellow soldiers. She neutralized a heavy machine gun position that had the entire patrol pinned down. She systematically eliminated enemy fighters from multiple positions with precision that would impress the most experienced snipers. Sarah stood frozen in place, overwhelmed by the public recognition and the stunned expressions on faces throughout the room. She had simply done her job as she saw it, but apparently her performance had been far more significant than she realized. Thompson slowly stood up and began clapping, his applause echoing through the otherwise silent hall. Within seconds, other soldiers joined in, and soon the entire room was on its feet, applauding the young woman who had proven them all wrong. Colonel Hayes waited for the applause to die down before continuing. "Private Martinez's achievement today is remarkable, not just because of the numbers, but because she accomplished this while under the skeptical gaze of soldiers who had already decided she couldn't handle combat situations. She earned her place here through merit, and today she proved that merit in the most definitive way possible." The colonel's gaze swept across the room, making eye contact with many of the soldiers who had openly questioned Sarah's capabilities. "This serves as a reminder that we cannot allow preconceived notions to cloud our judgment about our fellow soldiers' abilities. Combat effectiveness comes in many forms, and we dismiss potential at our own peril." As the briefing concluded and soldiers began filing out of the hall, many approached Sarah to offer congratulations and apologies. Rodriguez was among the first, his earlier nervousness replaced by genuine admiration. "I owe you an apology, Martinez. You saved all our lives today, and I was too panicked to even help. I've never seen anything like what you did out there." Thompson waited until most of the crowd had dispersed before approaching Sarah. The gruff sergeant, who had been her harshest critic, extended his hand with obvious respect. "Martinez, I was wrong about you, dead wrong. I've served with a lot of good soldiers over the years, but what you did today was special. You've got nothing left to prove to anybody in this unit." Over the following weeks, Sarah's story spread throughout the military community. Her achievement became a case study in combat effectiveness and a powerful argument against gender-based assumptions about military capability. She received several commendations and was recommended for advanced training programs typically reserved for much more experienced soldiers. But perhaps most importantly, Sarah had finally earned what she had sought from the beginning: the complete respect and trust of her fellow soldiers. She was no longer seen as a potential liability, but as one of the unit's most valuable assets. The whispers and doubts had been permanently silenced by the thunder of 11 precise shots fired in defense of her brothers and sisters in arms. Years later, when Sarah had advanced through the ranks and was training new soldiers herself, she would often tell them that respect in the military, like in life, could not be demanded or assigned. It had to be earned through actions, dedication, and performance when everything was on the line. Her story became proof that determination and skill could overcome even the strongest prejudices, and that true warriors came in all shapes and sizes.